Hello, Comic-Con! I am so excited to be here with these talented creatives who are here to share their insights on what it takes to bring a story to life. So, without further ado, let's get started. Because this is Comic-Con, I have to throw it first to Elle León and Andrew to talk about Mark of Death, a new comic book from Bliss on Tap Publishing that is available for purchase in person at booth 5533 today and online. Elle León, as a writer-producer in the film and television space, can you tell us why you two chose to tackle this story in the comic book medium and its current path to the big screen?
Yes. Well, I think everybody who's here loves great stories. Can I say that out loud? And so, however you can tell a story is beautiful. And for us, it was whether it's film or television, which obviously takes years, and it takes a lot of yeses, and you get a lot of nos. In a comic book format, you get to decide the adventure, and you get to guide that story. And so with a comic book, it's instant. You know, you can do incredible things on the page that would cost millions of dollars to do any other way. And for us, it was capturing something so exciting and thrilling. I mean, we have so many different facets in this comic book where it's time stealers and death dealers, and this guy is dealing with borrowed time, and there's serial killers that you can summon like Pokemon. Like, it's a crazy concept, but we were able to do all of that in the comic book world. And we fell in love with it. It's a medium that is so art-driven, and we got to work with Stephen Gordon, who is an amazing animator and illustrator. You've probably recognized his work of X-Men and the Avengers, and he's such a talent. And you kind of get to be in the driver's seat as a reader. You don't get to be told how to watch or experience a comic book. You get to decide how you do that. And it really is, there is no greater medium, which is why we're so honored to be here today.
Andrew, I know you and Elle León are currently in development on an animated series called Katari The Last Gods. That translates indigenous Andean lore into a magical and thrilling adventure. Can you tell us how you are approaching this series adaptation from little-known source material?
Yeah, one of the things that really inspires me is just tapping into the universality of the human experience. And a really sad fact is that there are about 7,000 languages spoken in the world today, and in my lifetime, that number is expected to be cut in half by 50%. And what we found when we went to South America is we found this really beautiful people of the Andean Plateau who had these very rich oral traditions that are getting lost to time. And we felt an imperative to capture that and bottle it and work with the cultures to take this rich and beautiful tradition and capture it so that it wouldn't be lost.
And really translate that lore in a way that nobody has ever seen it before. You know, stories that would never make it to America or internationally, and working with them, like I said, individually and saying, what stories matter to you? And one of the stories that popped out to both of us that's so beautiful is it was a story from the Ayoreo group in Bolivia, and which is where my family's from. And it was about how kids would be given honey in the tribe, and they'd be given different spoons of honey, and they'd only give you a certain set amount. And the child asked the mother, well, why can't I have more? And she goes, well, that's because the folly of man is he'll always want more once he tastes more. And translating those just simple ideas and concepts and lessons into a magical world that is basically, you know, Princess Mononoke meets Avatar: The Last Airbender with, you know, Attack on Titan.
Awesome. Now, you all use your crafts to tell stories and evoke emotions for the viewer. But Darren, I want to take it over to you because I find it interesting how you use music to help tell the story. You know, tell the story of nature when it can't speak for itself in nature documentaries. You know, the ones that you've scored with PBS Nova. How does your score move the story along?
Well, I think with, you know, projects that are sort of documentary style, you don't think naturally of a story, but like Andrew said, there's sort of a universality of human experience. And I think what you do is you draw from those and you come up with a story from that. You know, often when I'm working with a director or with a producer, I'm asking them, like, you know, what are we feeling here? Like, what's the emotion we're at here? And I think, you know, as a composer, that's our job to kind of translate that into music. And, you know, usually we get it right. Hopefully we get it right.
It sounds like you get it right based on what I heard.
Let's jump into the animation world for a little bit, and let's start off with Matthew. how do you approach the process of crafting music that resonates both with the characters and the overall narrative of the show? Could you share some insights into your creative process for animated projects like Hailey's on it?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, well, lucky for me and my co-composer on this project, this show was great even before music got involved. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to see an episode of the show yet. It just came out about a month ago on Disney Channel. But the writing is so funny and so smart. The performances of the voice cast are hysterical, and the visuals are so engaging that it actually really inspires so much of our process and what we do. It's really all very well laid out and defined for us, so we just get to kind of go in and play around. Process starting from the very beginning of this thing, we immerse ourselves into the world, which incidentally takes place not too far from where we actually are right now in Oceanside, California. And we get to know the characters, we get to think about the stories, and we just play around and think about what kind of tones and what kind of soundscapes are going to best represent these characters and the situations that they find themselves in. Thinking about the stories, there's a couple examples I think of where the stories actually can help dictate what we do musically on the show, just by virtue of the premise of the show, which is that this character, Hailey, has to kind of tackle her bucket list in order to save the world in a very wild supernatural event that is described better in the pilot than I can describe for you right now. But for example, one episode might find her having to perform in the school musical in order to check off an item from her bucket list. So to us as songwriters and composers, that's a cue to tap into our love of musical theater, and we wrote a bunch of songs and we did our underscore all leaning towards theater and those idioms. There's one episode where Hailey and her friends attend a superhero con. I wonder where they might have got an idea like that from. So obviously that episode is a cue for us to kind of lean into our love of superhero music, and we're leaning on all those idioms that we've come to know and love about music in the superhero projects. One other episode I could think of is a K-pop episode where Hailey makes it her mission to befriend the lead singer of the world's biggest K-pop band. So for someone like me, that's a huge opportunity because I actually make K-pop music aside from the music that I do in the animation space. I've been doing it for 10, 15 years already, and I've had the chance to work with some great real K-pop artists. So that episode was an opportunity for us to write a bunch of K-pop songs and do our underscore in a way that's kind of leaning into that world a bit. So if that answers the question, that's kind of how we can use the materials that are given to us by the writers and the visuals and the voice performances of the cast to kind of clue us in to where we need to take the music.
I think you wanted to sing some of that for us.
He promised he was going to throw me under the bus at a certain point in this. I will not.
Caroline, as the co-creator and director of projects like Toasty Tales and Golly's Cat Crafts, you've been involved in both the creative and directorial aspects of these projects. Could you discuss the process of developing and directing animated series? How do you balance storytelling, visuals, and character development to create engaging and entertaining content for viewers?
Yeah, so the development process and the directing process are two very different parts of making an animated show or really anything. And so in the development process in animation and, anything, you're really thinking about, the story. You're also developing the characters with the written word. You're developing their design. So how they look and their shape. You're thinking about color, you're developing the world. So there's a lot to think about. And those things all kind of play a little factor in the storytelling process. So there's this thing called shape language. And I really like to be a part of the writing and the design aspect early on because I believe those things play off each other. So like a character, if they're a little more squarish, they're going to be a little more standoffish feeling. Naturally, there's these little natural things that humans connect to with shape language. So if a character is round, it's going to be a little more happy and approachable and soft. So these things all kind of play into each other with the storytelling. So in development, I like to think all those processes help to tell the story. And then when you get into directing, you already, you have your script, and, you might be in animatic phase, and you find some of these things aren't working. So what I like to remember in my directing phase is that there's no precious babies. So sometimes, early on, you might write a joke or something, you're like, that is hilarious. But in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger picture, it might not work, it might not hit. So you have to be able to cut those little precious babies out to serve the larger picture. And so when you're part of the development, creative process, and directing, that can be a little harder. So you have to separate your ego a little bit and stand back and be like, this is for the greater purpose of the episode. It's not just about you, it's about everybody's work who's also contributing. Yeah, and the other thing about being a director really quick is, you're working with real humans. Everybody's participating, so you gotta be pretty cool to those people. Treat them well. Everybody's playing a part in the show. So.
And my next question is for javadoodles. Your
Yes.
most recent your most recent viral collaboration with Kevin James Thornton reached an impressive 23 million views. How do you feel when your animations resonate with such a large audience? And how might that inspire your future creative endeavors?
Oh my God. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. Yeah, honestly, I was a mixture of shocked and also just really grateful that my work had connected with so many people. Because when I first started collaborating with Kevin, it was really just for fun. And I remember one night, it was 3 in the morning, and I put out my first animation with him, which was the muscles animation. It was my first collab with him, and I went to sleep. I woke up the next day to 200,000 views on TikTok, and I remember thinking, what? So it was really just a mix of surprise, but also inspiring, and it just motivated me to make more. So I'll just sort of take that going forward and continue to use that energy to make my new work. So that's what you could expect from me going forward.
I just have to say, we have not met javadoodles with the mask off. I just want everybody to know that. And if they pass out in the heat, we will not take the mask off either. That was a direct direction from them. So it's a secret. It's like Spider-Man.
Elle León, diversity and representation in entertainment continue to be important topics of discussion. You're currently attached to write and executive produce 2 novel to series adaptations. Surrender Your Sons by Adam Sass, and Someone Is Always Watching by New York Times best-selling author Kelly Armstrong. How do you approach incorporating diverse perspectives and experiences into your work?
I think a lot of people talk about diversity on a daily basis, trying to improve it in our industry. And I think a huge part of what that is really is bringing diverse experiences into those rooms and being able to pitch projects that have universal stories. I think it's really hard when you're trying to, for example, my background being Latino, from Bolivia, being from the queer community, being able to talk about that, but also you don't want people to look at you any differently. And so it's about being able to capture those experiences in the universal experience. We all know what it means to feel lost. We all know what it means to fall in love, hopefully. And for that, you want to be able to translate those in a commercial sense. So for me, I always used to think, oh, it's art. It has to be amazing. And it doesn't matter who sees it because it's my vision. And that's so juvenile. But then as you grow up, you go, no, you want it to be commercial. You want everyone to see it. You want everybody to see your experience. And you want them to see your family on screen or your culture on screen. And to do that, you have to be able to translate those things, like I said, over and over. And I know it sounds super repeatable, but we've all said it at some point, which is the universal story. So with Surrender Your Sons, it's about a camp that basically where parents send their gay children, and it's a thriller, and these kids try to escape the program, and which is a very real thing that exists in our world today for troubled teen programs where kids are actually suffering. And that's why I was super attracted to that story, because first of all, a lot of people don't know about that, but also the fact that you want to erase something about someone, you can turn that into something very universal because there's something in all of us that we would like to erase at some point. And it's how do you put anybody into the perspective of these kids? Or with somebody's always watching, that's very much about how trauma influences us. And it's about these kids who they get their trauma erased. And what does that make them? Like, and of course, all of a sudden their minds start cracking and they start going on a murderous rampage. But all these things are kind of universal in a way. It sounds like a crazy concept, but we all have a past that haunts us, or we all have something that we feel like doesn't belong. And taking all these different things and putting a room of people together, which, yes, diversity, not just in ethnicity or creed or religion, or just where they grew up, but also diversity of thought, because every single person has an individual experience that is completely different from each other. We cannot just make a monolith out of every single group. Not all black people are the same, not all Latino people are the same, not all white people are the same, not all gay people are the same, and we can't just speak for all of them. We have to show every single individualized experience. And so I try to do that in my work, and we try to do that in our work with Andrew. We're never thinking about diversity and, well, we have to put a Latino character in here because, you know, it's a checkbox. It's, no, this feels right because the character would be in this situation. And it's just about authenticity and representation.
Very cool. And Darren, I want to throw the same topic over to you because you've worked on projects that really promote representation. You worked on a Sugar and Spice Holiday, which was the first holiday film with an all Asian American cast. How can scoring play a role in promoting and improving diversity and representation in film?
Well, I think, you know, like any sort of talent behind the camera, the more people see people who are doing those jobs that look like, you know, how you look, you know, I think it's a plus. You know, nobody wants to be the diversity hire, right? You know, everybody wants to be hired because that you're good at what you do. But I think what Elle León said, you know, is that authenticity comes from not because that, you know, I was forced to do piano lessons when I was 3. You know, I mean, which is, you know, part of that diversity comes from that. You know, part of my musical palette comes from that, right? You know, I have a classical music background. You know, I kind of, you know, my big rebellion was going to jazz. You know, and then
Whoa.
You know, and then I studied, you know, crazy weird music in college. And I think that all of those stories kind of bring that you know, that diversity isn't just like, you know, checking off a box and saying, hey, you know, we've got someone diverse, here you go. It's the collective experiences that we all bring to the table, I think, is what brings that, and including music, I think that, you know, it brings a richness to whatever picture, whatever project you're on.
Well, to talk about universal, I mean, you're kind of speaking the most universal language, which is music, you know, and it's beautiful.
It's even beautiful when it pays, too.
We can all agree about that. Yeah.
Talking about different, you know, perspectives and collaboration, it often requires compromise and finding a balance between different creative visions. How do you approach collaborative efforts to ensure a cohesive end project? Matthew, could you tell us about your experience on projects like Hailey's on it?
Yeah, well, I don't know anything about collaboration because I just do it all myself. No, I'm kidding. I mean, collaboration is so much at the heart of what we all do, especially in a visual medium like this. It requires a team of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people to put a project together. You know, I always like to think that a good collaboration is striking the right balance between sameness and differentness between you and your collaborators, like a parallel vision, but also the opportunity for veering off that path. Like at the biggest picture level, you have to be making the same show. We all have to be on the same train, on the same track. But once you're all on the same page with those big picture ideas like theme and tone and the demographic of the audience, that's really where the magic of your differences come into play, because once you're playing in that sandbox, you can go and make something truly special and unique and different. And I really like what you said, actually, about diversity of thought, because if everyone has the same thoughts, then you're going to end up with something boring and homogenized that's been done a million times before. But when you have an interesting collaboration, that's what's making something unique and fresh that only that assortment of people could have put together. So on Hailey's On It, I'm very lucky because there are a handful of very effective collaborations at play. I mean, even on a molecular level between me and my co-composer, Andrew Underberg, we're great collaborators because we have just the right balance of similarities. We have the same sense of humor. We have the same approach to storytelling and drama. We like a lot of the same kinds of music. We both grew up listening to musical theater and all kinds of different pop musics. We have the same approach to how we like to construct music. But within that, we have so many differences that allow us to create something that's kind of unique and a little bit different. I might specialize in one little twist on pop music. He might have an angle that's a little bit different. And together we come up with something that is kind of unique to the pair of us. And then taking that collaboration with the showrunners of Hailey's On It, Nick and Devin, who are these two hilarious guys, I think another element of collaboration that's super important is respect and trust. I mean, I think we all want to have our ideas respected, and I think as professionals, we all want to be trusted for our vision and what we can bring to the table instead of being micromanaged every step of the way. And if you can demonstrate that you're on the same page and we're all working towards the same collective vision, then it allows you within that framework to mess around and come up with some interesting, unique kind of offbeat approaches. So I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. Andrew, I'd love to hear your thoughts on collaboration and specifically, adapting material for film and TV.
I think we're all human, and my biggest flaw is when the quitting time comes on the clock, I get tired, and I want to say, today we did good, and that's good enough. One of the reasons I love working with Elle León is he goes, yeah, but is it really good? I mean, he keeps me honest in a really visceral way. And I think that other person in the room who loves and respects you, who also can say, but I know we can do better, that's where the best work goes. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, no, this is good enough, but good enough isn't great. And it's not perfect. And I think that having a really strong people who are both your hardest critics and your biggest champions are imperative for any creative project because no one can do it alone. And you need those hard notes from the people who love you the most. And so that's super important in any collaborative process.
Oh, I was just going to chime in right there and say that I think when you have a great collaborator like that, that's what makes the differences of thought. Instead of it being butting heads and throwing egotistical tantrums and confusing the end result, it actually helps you step up your game and challenge each other and inspire each other and level up your own ideas to become something better than what it would have been by yourself.
We introduced a veto rule that we've never used, which is like, okay, if you really hate something, you can veto it, right? You can definitely do that. But we never have because the truth is the story always wins. The best version of the project will always win. It's not, when we talk about ego, I'm like, what's that? Mine died forever ago. It takes so much effort to, like you said, butt heads until you're like, oh, we want this to be the best thing that it can be.
And I can't tell you could not count how many times you've asked me, can this be better? But I can tell you that I've never said, no.
I do ask that way too much, I think. Can this be better? There's a saying which is projects are never over, they're abandoned. So at a certain point you go, okay, it's time to deliver the baby. The baby, it's done.
So not only are you all basically jack of all trades, right? But you're also leaning into other industries as your careers progress. What are some key considerations to keep in mind when you're adapting your own material into other mediums? Caroline, can you tell us about your project, Tim Town?
Yeah, so Tim Town is a comic series that I've been working on for a little while. It's about Tim the Fox, and he lives in the city, and all he has in the world is the stump that he sleeps on in this big vacant lot in the city. And it's based on my experiences really loosely based on my experiences. 2008, 2009, I had just graduated from school, just in time for the financial crisis to hit. And the company that I was working for could no longer pay me. I was working freelance. I could not collect unemployment. So I was surviving on food stamps, living in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. And it was a really rough time in my life. But even through all that roughness, it wasn't like a horrible time. I still had like these goals that I was focused on. I wanted to, I knew this was not going to be forever. And I had a lot of really interesting experiences during that time. And I thought, this is really important. I want to honor this time in my life, but in like a really fun way that is accessible to a larger audience, and maybe can be a positive influence on people. So that's kind of Tim Town in a nutshell. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm adapting the first part of Volume 1 of the comic into a short film, just a really quick little 2-minute thing. And what I'm finding is as I'm translating, it's not a one-to-one translation going from a comic to animation, because you have a real actual timeline that you're dealing with now. When you're reading, this is why we don't have any one-to-one translation of books. As soon as you start introducing a moving timeline, you have to change things up. When you're reading, you can, really get into the mindset of the character. When you're viewing and the timeline is moving, you're being presented to, and so you can't take the time to just kind of sit with the character. You're watching things happen. So I found that I have to set up this little short a little differently. So as I was moving into the storyboarding phase, I had to start with a script so I could get my voice actor to send me his recordings. So I got that, and I was editing it together and realizing, like, we're just jumping in here, and that's really kind of rude for the audience. It's not going to work if you just. So the first panel of the comic is Tim the Fox on a white background. There's nothing there, no context, and he's got his Christmas hat, and he just says, "Oh my God." And then the next panel is him holding up this gift, and he just yells, "Best gift ever." And you can do that in a comic because you're like, all right, I'm along for this journey now. But if you do that to an audience, they've just sat down, they're watching this thing, you're just throwing them in. They're like, what is going on? You have to establish your setting at the very least. So I went back in and I put a minute, like a page of script at the top to kind of establish things and let you know, like, we're in the city. Tim is a fox, and, some really basic things that, allow the audience to have a little bit of a moment to get used to being in this world, and then you hit them with the weirdness, So, yeah, that's what I would say, just like developing, when you're moving into, if you are going to make a little animated film and you're adapting something that is written, just kind of realize that things are not going to be one-to-one. They are going to change a little bit.
And can I just say, your journey and your talent, you're a badass.
I'd love to open that one up to everyone. And does anyone have any experiences adapting their own work into other mediums, and what challenges and successes have you found in that process?
So I've done some live scores and then done them live to picture, and one of the really interesting. So we've done some of these really epic documentary things. We've added a live narrator, we've recut the film, and then we've presented in front of a live orchestra. One of the really coolest things that you can do as a composer is kind of conduct an orchestra and a choir in a room full of people kind of going like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? But what I'll say that the biggest thing that we found in terms of challenges was actually balance. It's very logistical, right? In terms of, we've got live sound coming out from the movie, we've got a live orchestra, we've got a narrator coming out there, and when you're doing film or television, you can just adjust the mix. It's not quite simple when you're doing it in front of a live audience. You got to figure out like, oh shit, I wasn't supposed to say that. You can't say, oh crap, orchestra's too loud. We got to rewrite the orchestra part, or oh, there's way too much narration here. We got to change the narration. Like the difference between doing live and I think on a recorded basis is completely different, and you have to kind of figure out how to balance those different elements there.
Yeah, and with like Mark of Death, we started it as originally it was a pilot. And we're like, oh, this is such an exciting world, and we want to be able to translate this. And then, we said, okay, let's just make this as a comic, right? And so, but translating, this was our first comic, and to be able to translate a television series into a double issue. First, it was supposed to be a single issue, and then we're like, oh, this is a very big story. We have a lot to cram in here. And so the first issue became a double issue, and it encapsulates all the kind of different aspects of the world. And I think that was very much a different challenge. But you should definitely check it out. We're going to sell some comics after this if anybody's interested in picking up. Anybody who was at the panel, you get a discount.
Ooh. I will say one really exciting thing about translating this from a pilot script to a graphic novel and even taking it back into the film and television world is we've been with this story for so long, so I know all of its nooks and crannies. I'm deeply in love with it. And somebody will pick it up and look at it for 5 minutes and go, I really like this Mark guy. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad you like that one thing. But they'll fall in love with something so weird that I don't even think about anymore. Or I love the title. And like, that's the reason they like it. And I think it's so wild I love it so fully, but people will find one thing to latch onto. And I think that's the really magic, is to fill your projects with many things for people to latch onto that they can love from all angles.
Yeah, it's like people finally realize it after they read it why the title is Mark of Death, because his name is Mark.
His name's Mark.
And but he also joins an order where he has to mark people for death. So Mark marks people for yeah.
Yeah.
We say that a lot in the comic. Please laugh.
Now, we all know that the entertainment is very highly competitive and can be challenging. What advice or valuable lesson would you like to share with those who are just starting out, who are looking to enter the entertainment industry? Javadoodles, let's start with you. Could you talk about the animation space and what you've learned in your career so far?
So something I used to do, I really wanted to be a storyboard artist, and that's one of the most competitive jobs in the entire animation industry. But I was like determined. I was like, one day I'm going to be a board artist. And for about 5 years, I would take these storyboard tests, pretty much unpaid. You would take a storyboard home and you do it and you give it back to the director. And each time I would be sort of filled with hope. Maybe this time I'll get a storyboard job. I think I took about 25 tests before I gave up. And I was sad at first, but then I realized maybe I don't actually want to be a storyboard artist. Maybe I just want to make my own work. You know, I don't have to mold myself to someone else. And that's when I decided to start posting on Instagram, YouTube, and then TikTok sort of became a thing a few years ago. So what I learned from that is that you don't have to box yourself in. If you have a creative voice, you could just sort of do your own thing and put it out there, and the right people will see it. So while it's competitive, there's also space for your own voice.
Caroline, what's one piece of advice you have?
Yeah, animation industry is a difficult place to be, especially if you're trying to break in. And I would just say, if you want to be in animation, you can just, stick with it. You could do what Javadoodles did. You could do your own thing. Your worth is not attached to a studio name. So just remember that. Create. Go out there and do it. Yeah.
And Darren?
Thank you for giving me the time to think about this one. Don't be a jerk. I think that there are, whatever, especially in the creative field, it's so much. We all want to kind of go back into our little caves and be, just alone with our art and just create. But so much of it is, I think, human relationships, whether it's your collaborators, whether it's potential buyers, whether it's whomever, And I always, life is too short to work with bad people, right? And I think that if you hold yourself to a high level and you treat people with respect, I think that karma is an incredible thing and a horrible thing, And I think don't be a jerk would be my advice.
That's great advice. Yeah.
The thing that really guides me, there's this one saying that was said to me one long time ago that sticks with me every day. There are many paths to the top of the mountain, but only one view. There are many ways to get to where you're going, and it really takes an enormous amount of people, and people can really feel the love and passion you have in your project. And once you get there, it's kind of just the one view, and that's okay. And so you don't have to be focused on doing anything one way or another, because at the end of the road, it all kind of goes to the same place. And I feel like this industry is full of a lot of people who will tell you to do it this way or that way. And I think more important than that is passion and love. People can feel passion, people can feel love. And if you let those two things be your guiding principles, you will make it to the top of the mountain. And there's room for everyone.
Yeah.
Amen. I think this one kind of it's the first thing that popped into my head, and I think it's really hard to think about, but it's find out who you are first. Who are you and what do you have to offer? You know, we constantly, in a day and age where we're inundated with media and Instagram and everything that we're told or shown we're supposed to be, we stop listening to our own voice. And you have to sit with yourself for a minute and say, what do I have to offer the world and what is my story? Instead of trying to fit whatever someone's looking for or whatever's the hot thing that day. It's, you know, like every single person's already said, and javadoodles, you're a prime example of this, is, you know, go your own way. And people are going to love it because it is your passion and it is the thing that you love and it's the thing only you uniquely can do. And I for myself, I didn't, you know, get back into writing and producing until I was a costume designer for years. And I thought, you know, one day I'll do it, right? One day I'll make the switch and I'll follow my dream. And you get so lost in the path that you thought was right that you forget to take the leap of faith. And when I finally did, I found my success and was so grateful that I took the plunge. And I think everybody tells you, you know, pay your dues. You know, you can't do it. You have to do it in this amount of time, or this is the way you have to do it. And honestly, that's a lie. You have to be told that you can do it if you start today. I think any other thinking is just holding you back from the reality that you can be successful if you just listen to yourself.
Well, that's such a great answer. I wish we could have left it there. I wish we were in different
Matt
spots.
had some thoughts on that.
What's the most insightful thing you could possibly imagine? I mean, my answer would be a little bit more pragmatic. Something that's always served me is I just have to work as relentlessly hard as humanly possible, because I think that, you know, you can't control the talents that you're given, but you can control how much time you spend developing them. And there's a lot of talented people out there. And I'm prepared to outwork them all. So if that's going to be my edge, that'll be my edge. And I think tying into what Darren said, it can also be nice. It can also be nice. A lot of people don't know how to be nice. So if you can be nice and you can work really hard, I think that might be certainly maybe my little edge to beat out people who might be more talented than me.
I think that's really important. I should have added that too. You got to work really hard also.
That's some great advice from everyone. Thank you so much for sharing. I think being nice is key. That's a great.
Should be the baseline.
Be nice to everyone, and
It wasn't be nice. It was, don't be a jerk.
and make a lot of friends.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from everyone. Like, how did you get started in the industry? Like, what was your first gig? You want to start with Matthew?
My first gig. Well, actually, I have a funny story. You know, I was a kid in Canada. I'm from Toronto, living in my parents' basement growing up, like relentlessly teaching myself how to write songs and produce music, and never exactly set out to work in television or television animation or with Disney or in K-pop, which is another huge side of what I do. So it all kind of happened by accident. I was writing these pop songs and trying to get them cut with major artists, and then someone said to me, you know, you should really send this to Disney. I think they might like this for some of the projects they're working on. And sure enough, that one song, they thought maybe it would work in Hannah Montana. It did not work in Hannah Montana. We had just missed the boat. Miley had recorded her very last song for the last season, and they hung on to it, and it ended up becoming a song in a movie called Lemonade Mouth, called She's So Gone. And that was one of my first big songs ever as a professional songwriter, and that kind of started my relationship with Disney and Disney Channel, and now Disney Junior and Disney Television Animation, and all the Disney, all the divisions of Disney. And I realized that this is where I'm meant to be. It's just like the magic combination of the Venn diagram of all the things I like are all the things that they make. I'm a little theatrical. I'm a little bit pop music. All these little things kind of combine, and it's exactly where I'm meant to be. And I love it. I love it.
I remember coming to LA and hustling a few jobs, and a friend of mine called, and he's like, hey, this low-budget series is looking for a costume designer. And I was like, why are you calling me? I've never done that before. And he's like, well, you're gay, right? You're good at clothes. This is a friend of mine. And I'm like, that is so offensive, but I will definitely take the job. So I took the job, and I worked my butt off and taught myself how to sew on the fly. It was with Danny Pudi. It was called The Book Club. It was a really big comedy. Jillian Jacobs was in it, and it was just this. I think that's who it was. And it was crazy. It was ninjas and Chinese empresses, and it was just all this crazy stuff. But I was just doing it. I was like, oh yes, you want a crazy ghost? I can make that. And I did it. And the director was like, you're incredible. And he took me under his wing, and then immediately took me to my first job as a stylist, which was doing a commercial for the Expendables. So I went from, being this nobody who'd never, who only knew how to dress themselves, to dressing a bunch of stars. And then from then I costume designed The House with Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler. I did Terminator Dark Fate, the LA unit. I did Men in Black International, the LA unit. And that was when I woke up and I said, whoa, I'm living someone else's dream. This is really cool. But this is, I shouldn't be doing this. So, but it was an amazing, amazing experience. I wouldn't have traded it for the world because I got to meet so many producers and so many people in the industry that taught me so many things. And that was before I changed my name. So.
Well, and Elle might not consider it their first gig, but it was my first gig, fresh out of college. We actually spent 2 years working on documentary work.
Oh, yes.
A piece called Fix My Kid, which is about abusive drug and alcohol rehab programs in America that abuse children and call it drug therapy. And it really solidified my desire to listen to other people's very real stories and to try to translate that into the beautiful medium of art and film. And I think that was a really beautiful experience.
Yeah, that was definitely not a paid job. That was the passion project.
Well, starting with passion jobs when you were young and clueless, I was trying to get into film composing, and so I put up these posters in Montreal, where I was living at the time at Concordia, saying, I will score your film for free with a 30-piece orchestra, right? I was like, why not, right? And then so we put those up, and all of a sudden, I got, I think, like 3 calls. You'd think that people in film school would have a little bit of foresight to think, wow, that's a pretty good deal. The great thing about that was that the 2 of the films that we did, and so what we do, that McGill, they had this masters in sound recording program where we had these engineers trying to figure out how to record people, and you'd have people like me, composers, trying to figure out how to actually do this, right? And so this kind of happy little medium, and we all had pizza and beer afterwards to celebrate that none of us were getting paid. The great thing about it is that, one director that I did one of those projects with, I've done all of his feature films, starting another film in a little bit. He's won awards at Toronto and at Sundance and at Cannes. And it's really about the long game. It's about the relationship, and it's really about just kind of showing up and not being a jerk.
And you're not a jerk, Dan.
Oh.
Don't be a jerk.
My first professional gig was translating New Yorker comics into short animations, which was very cool, but then financial crisis, out of a job for a while. So my exciting re-entry into the industry was actually working on shows like Robot Chicken, and I worked in the art department and the set and prop department. It was a lot of fun, and then that led to other things. That company was called Shadow Machine, and now they do a lot more like 2D stuff. So they did the BoJack Horseman, and they did the Pinocchio movie. So a lot of exciting projects happening with them. So that re-entry of stop motion led to a lot of other opportunities. And I know this question is about what was your entry, but I just want to say that you never know where a job will lead. Even if it's like not a big gig, like it could lead to something pretty cool, and some cool people you could be working with. So, always be open to opportunity.
So I got my start in animation. I just decided when I was about 7 years old. I said, "Mom, Dad, I'm going to be an animator," and they were like, "All right." And that was after I watched Toy Story for the first time, and I watched the credits roll, and I just noticed there were so many names, and I thought to myself, "Wow, you can actually do this as a job? That's awesome." So then I just decided, as a kid, with all the knowledge of life that I had, this is what I'm gonna do. But it actually worked, because I ended up working at pretty much every major animation studio in New York and Los Angeles, and I'm very, very grateful. And that experience really gave me the courage to start my YouTube channel, start my TikTok, and then just sort of trust my creative instincts. So yeah, really grateful for those opportunities, and especially connecting with my audience, and I'm really excited to see what's next.
So quickly, to wrap up the panel, can each of you tell us something about your next piece of work?
I would just encourage everyone to check out Hailey's On It, which is just came out a month ago on Disney Channel. We're about, I don't know, third through the first season. It's just hilarious, and it's a great show, and I love it as a mid-30s guy. So it has something for everybody, and then we're really proud of all the music we've made for it, and I think it's turned out really well. So that would be my pick.
Well, obviously Mark of Death, so come check it out. We'd love to give you guys a copy. And for example, I think right now the most project that's not related to everything being shut down because of the strike would be Fix My Kid, which is a documentary series that Andrew and I did start forever ago, which is now in partnership with Michael Sugar's Sugar 23 and Sony Pictures House of Nonfiction. So we have been developing that to be able to get this incredible story out into the world.
Well, the thing I'm excited to share with Katari and the Last Gods is you're all familiar with the pantheon of Greek gods and these things that you're so familiar with, but Katari is such a new world that has a rich lore of very powerful, eons old, gods and magic and characters that I've been excited every day diving into it and excited to present to the world through that project too. So it's really exciting.
Very cool. I've got two projects that we just wrapped up on. One is a Chinese studio feature film called Unspoken. It's really cool. It's dark. It's gritty. Really cool film. And then the other film is a redo on the story of Calamity Jane. Nice kind of good old fashion Western. So there you go.
Very cool. So currently in production with my little company Tiny Lion on Golly's Cat Crafts and the Tim Town short film. And those are going to be coming out later this year. And I actually brought some copies of my Tim Town comic and some buttons and stuff. So if anybody would like those, I will have them available. Just meet me over here.
I'm going to be continuing along with my comedy animations, working with Kevin James Thornton and any other voice actor who wants to work with me. I also started a weird existential animation about little blob characters. I'm actually wearing one of my characters right now. It's called Blobbo and Xavier, and there's 2 episodes live right now, but I plan on making 1,000 more. So that's live on my YouTube channel right now, and hopefully more episodes soon.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our panelists, Matthew, Elle León, Andrew, Darren, Caroline, and javadoodles, for being here with us today to discuss their creative work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 PR and Comic-Con for putting on this panel. And thank you to all of you for joining us.